Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, and today I'm bringing you a quick review on the upcoming documentary Arsene Wenger Invincible, of course, based on the legendary football manager himself. This is obviously a documentary that's going to be very personal to me. You guys will know on the channel I'm a massive Arsenal fan, or if you're following from Twitter, you'll know that obviously most of my tweets are either football, film, or F1 related. So yeah, this is going to be a very fun review. One I'm very lucky to have been able to get a screener for. But before I start getting into my thoughts on the film, as you can tell, there's been a match today. I'm pre-recording this the day before, and this is going to be released on Monday the 8th online. You'll be seeing this when it's up in the morning, and the film's going to be out on DVD on the 22nd of November and in limited cinemas this Thursday the 11th. So there may be options for you to watch this at the cinema. I just want to quickly plug that right away. However, I want you to comment below your thoughts. If you're watching this down the line and you've seen the film, I want to let me know your thoughts on this as a documentary. Or if you're sort of curious, let me know your thoughts on Arsene Wenger, one of the true greats of English football. So do comment along, hit that subscribe button. We have actually had a fair few sport documentaries this year. We don't normally get to get sport stuff on the channel, but we've had Drive to Survive Season 3. We've had the Schumacher documentary. We had the Pele documentary, and there's a couple of others I'm trying to catch up on that I missed. So I think there was one on Fergie, who I'll be bringing up actually later on in this review. So there is more sports stuff. There will be hopefully more sports stuff down the line. Maybe there might be even more football documentaries. Who knows? So do follow us. And if you are into films, this is a channel to be. We've got so many things happening: new reviews, old reviews, retrospectives. It's heading to a really busy end of year. But it was lovely to be able to sit down and get a chance to watch this. And if you're curious about where you can find us, about what videos are coming up, hit us up on our social medias, which is Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterbox.com/cinema-savvy, and we have a link to TeePublic in the description below. But as I said, we are here to talk Arsene Wenger Invincible. And I always talk about thoughts heading into a film. So this was announced, I think, last year. I don't want to say it was around the time of The Last Dance, but I remember watching Last Dance. And it was a couple of months later they announced that there was going to be a Wenger documentary. And obviously, as an Arsenal fan, that's incredible to have. And as someone that's a very big fan of not just obviously the club, but Arsene Wenger as well, I kind of thought, yeah, like, it's the right time to do it. There's been a few years since he's left the club now. He's got a new role at FIFA, and I want to hear more of his story. Obviously, he had a book come out last year as well. There's a couple of charity events on the next few weeks, so it's timed really well. But heading into this film, I was desperate to see this. One of my most anticipated films of the year once the date was announced. Obviously, we've had some big films, but this was one for me that was very personal to get the chance to watch. And just as a sort of heads up heading into it, obviously, I'm in an Arsenal top, so that shows one form of bias, but my connection to the club is a fascinating one. Obviously, I've got relatives that are from Barnet, from North London, and it's essentially been on my dad's line of the family where everyone's always supported Arsenal. So obviously that sort of nurtured down to me. But I was a bit of a late bloomer. Obviously, this is about the Invincible. I missed the Invincibles era. I didn't really get into football till the 07-08 season. And for those that are in the know, my first ever game I went to for Arsenal was the Eduardo leg break at Birmingham. So I've essentially missed the glory years that this film really goes into. So not that I don't know them. I've spent obviously so many years reading, watching clips, highlights, everything. So I'm very familiar with the story. But telling the story of Arsene is something that I've really wanted to hear because he is by far one of the not the most respectable managers in football history, but his story about where he grew up, what career paths he chose that led to him going to Arsenal and essentially reinventing the English football game. I think that's something that is 100% needed to be seen, a documentary that is worthy of being made. And kind of going in with that, I want to absolutely commendably right away say this is a fantastic documentary. This is easily one of my favorite films of the year. Obviously, as I said, I'm an Arsenal fan, so you can make of that what you want. But I was really blown away about what stories they wanted to tell about Arsene. So, it's not really a spoiler to talk about his reign as such. If you're not familiar with Arsene Wenger or even football as a whole, this is one of the few genuine characters in the game that people may want to hear more about because his input on football is far more than just managing Arsenal Football Club. He reshaped football in athletes, and in that Schumacher documentary I spoke about, they go on about how he was the very much the first athlete in F1. He brought fitness in. And Arsene Wenger is very much the manager that got the players to stop drinking, start, not dieting, but essentially looking after themselves so they can progress, make the careers as long as possible. And hearing that as a kid, I used to read the autobiographies as them as well. It's really interesting to then see how a film could potentially cope with this because this has to tell the story of the Invincibles. It's got Invincible in the title, but I wanted to get more about Wenger, and it delivered on that. We learned about his early life, the town he grew up in. We get a lot of scenes filmed and set there. But what was really interesting for me, as well as a Wenger fan, is we get a lot of coverage of him in Japan when he managed Grand Passate. And I think this is what was really interesting for me, that we talk about archive footage. I know the Beatles documentary is out soon. I know that, as I mentioned, we've had Last Dance recently. There's something really nice about seeing archive footage from the 90s, 80s restored in high definition. And this film delivered on that. You can't tell the story without Wenger about, you can't just say how great he was at Arsenal. You've got to build up to what led him to get to Arsenal. And we get interviews with so many ex players. I think Ian Wright's one of the big ones. They've got archive footage of him saying Arsene who when he got hired for the job. And we get the whole trajectory of that he wasn't an appealing prospect for the players. They would mock him, they'd laugh at him. And it deals with some of the really important stuff that many documentaries would choose not to do. Some documentaries will just want to paint an easy picture, which is, again, to bring up Schumacher. When I said they said everything they had to say, there was nothing new or invigorating. They spoke about the downside of him because they were the three big incidents of his life that everyone knows about. And with the Wenger one, I was shocked as well. There were rumours of him resigning a few weeks after taking over. This documentary actually deals with the racism in English football. Not the current racism, I would say. It's obviously still happening. It's very important that they address this. But Arsene Wenger was one of the very first foreign managers in English football, and he was always picked on because of that. He was mocked because of that. He wasn't like an A-list reputation, and this was the era where there was still very much sort of British footballers everywhere, and he was bringing in these cheap foreign players that ended up being world-class world beaters that were winning things. And it's so important for me that this film covered that, and it did. And it's just incredible to hear some more of those stories that I wasn't familiar with. And I think, again, it's so integral to his reign at Arsenal and where everything led to. And there's a beautiful moment where they speak about him signing Patrick Vieira, who's interviewed in this film a lot as well. And obviously, if you maybe in modern, you'll know that he's obviously managing Crystal Palace now. He speaks about that that was the very first player that he ever signed at Arsenal. And that when the Invincibles era, when the Invincible season happened, he was the player at the end of it that scored the winning goal to make them the Invincibles. And there's something really fitting about this documentary. As I mentioned, they interview so many ex-players. You've got some of the big names. You've got Ian Wright, Robert Pires, Thierry Henry, Dennis Bergkamp, just legends score. There's some that they miss out on, which is a shame. But another really interesting character is the fact they got Fergie in this, Sir Alex Ferguson, for those that aren't familiar. And again, it's easy for me to talk about the last 30 years. Alex Ferguson is as important to Arsene Wenger's story as Arsene Wenger at times. The biggest rivalry in English football, not just at the time, but one, both teams are now average. And this rivalry exists still, and it was always a build up. But having the two greatest managers in the modern era, being at each other every year, a complete clash of ideologies, it is one of the greatest rivalries ever made. And I don't think you can have one without the other. And one thing this documentary does really well, it doesn't shy away from some of the negative things with Arsene. So there's a beautiful setup. So we've obviously got the normal documentaries interviews as you expect, but this one also has Wenger in a studio looking at some of the old footage. And there's a beautiful line where he speaks about, millimeters can determine a game. This is along those lines, but the two big talking points are if anyone familiar, the 99 treble United team, when Bergkamp missed the penalty, and obviously Manu went on to win the treble, which they all know that United probably wouldn't have won a treble with that. And they speak about the Invincibles '04 when Van Nistelrooy did the dive and missed the penalty. And that, if he hadn't hit the bar at millimeters, there would be no Invincibles. So, just hearing Wenger speak freely is something that I've always loved. If you're familiar with the game, you know that he's one of the most respectable figures. He never trash talks, he never goes in on things. The few times he lost his head was always publicized because he very rarely lost his head. He wasn't aggravating. He just liked to be honest and call out the integrity of the game, which, as history has proven, right, he's always been in the right. So it's a really fascinating one, but it does tell you Arsene Wenger's story. And another important thing for me, you might be thinking, does this end at '04 and they don't speak about anything else? Absolutely not. This film really tells his story. It speaks about the second era, the Emirates era. As you can say, it had the times he almost left Arsenal. Did he regret leaving Arsenal? It's a question that he answers and goes into in the story. And it's amazing when you look at it back. And I think with Wenger as an Arsenal, it's impossible not to talk about the last few years, with the absolute horror show of AFTV and stuff like that coming in, which really sharpened the blades of a lot of idiots. It gave people a platform to speak on. It doesn't go into AFTV as such. But my biggest negative for this, I will say, is hearing Piers Morgan and DT from AFTV in the Wenger documentary. I didn't like that. I understand they needed to get across the point of maybe figures from the game being this voice about, is he past it? Is it time for him to go? But it's really upsetting to see those two, given that one of them has obviously been done and in prison a lot for I mean, I think domestic abuse is one of DT's many things, and obviously Piers Morgan, who obviously got the 50 Arsenal fans banned after faking stories when he was the newspaper editor back in the day. So I will call out that as two things I really disliked, but I understand why they were in there. I just think there were other ways to get across the point of people being Wenger out towards the end. I think it is a very important part of his reign that how wrong the Arsenal fans were, how badly they treated him towards the end of his career. But it does give you a lovely insight into some of those last few games. Obviously, they speak a lot about his last home game, which I was fortunate enough to go to with my sister. And it's quite sad, really, when they compare it to being at a funeral, whereas at the time as a celebration, it was an incredible game to have gone to. But then you look at his opinions of it and you do think, oh, wow, like he really was bang on it. It was a bit like a funeral. And, just hearing Arsene's insight amongst these legends around him is really extraordinary. And I know I've spoken a lot about this film and how great it is, but honestly, I have nothing but praise for it. It's a very delicate subject matter to get right. You could have focused on the Invincibles and forgotten about what came after, but this was able to tell Wenger's story. As I said, him growing up, his philosophies, his family man ideals. Then you've got the Monaco as well and Grand Passat, his early days, and everything led up to his Arsenal reign. And it's so important to get it right. And these are split narrative for it as well, which I think was the right thing to do. It's not a simple ABC. It builds up to certain moments and moments you'll predict and be aware of across his reign. So, I do want to say this is a fundamentally excellent documentary. I'm approaching this as both an Arsenal fan and as somebody that obviously is into film, but the review for me is going to be as simple as go and see this film. I know it's got limited cinema run. I will be watching this again. My dad really wants to watch it. We're going to go to the cinema together. And what it's worth. I want to sit here and say it's emotional. I didn't tear up or anything, but it's so nostalgic looking back at those era. And I know I spoke about I missed so many of those games, but when it's reeling off year by year and these moments, these iconic moments, it's really something. And we spent the last week going through my old football programs from the games I've been to from his era. So it is one of them where, as an Arsenal fan, this is a must watch. You really should be watching this on release. And if you're a fan of football, 100% check out. You might be familiar with it, but if you're into the sport, you'll know that Arsene Wenger is a man that people like to listen to. And I can't really suggest anything other than that. Please watch this film. It was a beautiful film. It was lovely to be able to hear his story and to bring in his rivals as well that were involved in his story. It wasn't just him talking about his career. He is honestly one of the greatest managers in the game, but more important than that, he's one of the most respectable people in the game. And as every passing week and month and year goes by since him leaving Arsenal, it's just so nice to get the opportunity to hear him again, that we still get to get his insight. I know that he's a pundit on French TV a lot, but he is truly one of the greats of the modern game. And I'm glad this story was done in a way where new people may be able to find out about him. And this will certainly have the test of time. Again, as I mentioned, all the key moments from his Arsenal career discussed, the winning side of it, the top four side of it, the end of it, the beginning. It's everything you want from a documentary. It succeeds in telling the story and it doing it in a way that is not just how great is Arsene Wenger. It's a deep dive into the philosopher that we all know and adore, and I cannot recommend this film more than that. So I'm going to leave that as my review for this film. As I said, it's very hard to talk documentaries when it's based on something you're so familiar with. So as I said earlier, I'm curious if you have seen the film. Please comment and let me know your thoughts on Arsenal Invincible. And do comment what football team you support. I'd really hope some people see this that aren't an Arsenal fan as such, that might not be as familiar as some of us with this story, or anyone like that, because it's a very interesting discussion to be had. And as I said, he's a legend of the game. He's helped define modern football and turn it into what it has become. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on him and after watching this documentary. So do hit the like button, do comment, subscribe. We are loving the support. I said the sports stuff's been really interesting to be able to do this year. We've of course done Ted Lasso, which I didn't mention earlier. So a lot of football stuff is still in play. If you want to find out what videos we're going to be doing and where we're going to be doing them, the best way is to do that on social media. Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterbox.com/cinema_savvy. We have a link to TeePublic in that description below. And if you're curious about what films are coming next, there's a lot of things happening on this channel, as we said. At the time of this going up, there's going to be a Ghostbusters review tonight of the original 1984 film. We're going to be going through 1, 2 in the build up to Afterlife. We've also got starting tomorrow the Austin Powers reviews. That's myself and Chris. going to be jumping on them each week as we go through the Austin Powers films, having just done all the Bond films. We want to lighten the mood of a bit of comedy. So we'll be starting those. And the Peter Jackson retrospective continues this Thursday, 11th of November, with the review on Braindead as we build up to Lord of the Rings in December. So that is also one to watch. And as we mentioned, there are many new releases. There's so many films coming out at the moment. There's some bigger ones coming up, but I was just very glad to get the chance to watch this. And if you are curious about where I really think of this is sitting in my top 5 of the year so far. It meant that much to me, and it was an absolute beauty to be able to see. So do watch this film, comment your thoughts, and once again, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll be sure to see you on the next one.